Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Ashley Rumschlag, the CEO and president of Teresa's Fund and domesticshelters.org. I'm joined today by Rachel Myers, our digital services specialist, and Hannah Craig, our senior content strategist and creator, who will be monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout the presentation. We are so excited today to be hearing from three innovative professionals to discuss hiring, managing, and retaining frontline staff. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Live closed captionings are available for this webinar. To enable, please click More in the menu bar and select Show Subtitle. A transcript will also be provided within a week of the presentation. All attendees are in listen-only mode, so your camera and microphone are turned off. If you have questions for the presenters, please put those in the Q&A box. The chat box can be used to communicate with other attendees and share any issues with the webinar so we can make sure to address those as quickly as possible. The certificate, transcript, slides, recording, and Q&A, and any additional resources mentioned today will be emailed to all attendees within the next week. Just a few reminders about domesticshelters.org. Hopefully everyone is familiar with the free resources and tools that we offer on our website, but we'll just run through those quickly. Again, we have a free resource for free online resource for domestic violence information. We host a searchable database of all the different programs and resources and shelters for domestic violence victims and survivors throughout Canada and the United States. We also offer a library of shareable content. So that's articles, lists, videos, lots of content there that we encourage everyone to share with their audience as well as clients to help inform about domestic violence. We also have a data center where you can make custom data reports based on information that we've collected around on domestic violence programs in the US and Canada. If you're located in the United States, if you're a domestic violence program located in the United States, and you're in our searchable database, you are eligible for a free wish list. And that allows people from anywhere in the world, really, to go in, find your organization, and purchase items that are shipped directly to your organization. They don't have to arrange a pickup. They don't have to go out and buy things at the store. It's all done right online. And then we also host the Purple Ribbon Awards. The nomination period for 2022 will open up on January 1st. So keep an eye on your inbox for more details about that program. And finally, if you're looking to connect with other domestic violence professionals, we do host a Facebook group. We're just going to drop a link to that in the chat. So we encourage you to join that group. It's a great place to ask questions, share success stories, and just connect with other domestic violence professionals. All right, and just wanted to mention our webinar archive. So if you enjoy attending these webinars, if you find them helpful and you want to attend more, we have a library. I believe we're at about 19 webinars in our library right now that are available on demand. You can share those with your team members, watch them yourselves, and we can issue a certificate of attendance to anyone that reaches out and lets us know that they watched the video. All right, so we're going to kick things off with a quick poll question. So let's look at what we have here. One more. Get this launched up here. All right, so our question is today, has your organization been affected by the Great Resignation? So for those of you that are hearing that term for the first time, it's a term that's been coined for the time that we're in right now, where people are leaving their jobs as a result of COVID-19, whether that be for safety reasons or because of new perspective that have been gained by going through such a traumatic time. So we'll take a moment here to get everyone's insight on what they're experiencing, because what we're talking about today kind of ties into this general theme that's in the news these days, and different kind of shifts in how domestic violence programs are hiring and retaining employees. All right, we'll see if we can get up to 75%. We're at about 60, 70% right now. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, we encourage you to share your answer in the comments. All right, so we'll wrap this up here in 3, 2, 1. We'll end the poll and share the results. So those of you listening on Facebook and call-in listeners, you will not be able to see the results. So let's talk through those. 65% said yes, that they are being affected by the Great Resignation. 27% said no, and 8% said they weren't sure. So maybe they'll have a clear picture on that once we have this discussion today. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing this poll here. All right, and thank you everyone for participating. Okay. So without further ado, our panelists today represent both rural and urban programs and have decades of experience leading large and small scale organizations. To start today, each panelist is going to take about 5 or 10 minutes to introduce themselves and share any opening remarks about what they're experiencing in terms of hiring, managing, and retaining frontline staff. After that, we'll dive into a discussion. And if any point you have questions, please place those in the Q&A box, which can be found in the Zoom toolbar. And we'll address these questions in the last 15 to 20 minutes of the presentation. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll start things off with Carla Washington. Carla is the Vice President of Programs and Chief Partnership Officer at Sojourner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello to everyone. And so thank you for taking time to join and hear about this topic. And Ashley, I want to thank you and domesticshelters.org for inviting me to be a panelist. As Ashley said, I'm from Sojourner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We are the largest nonprofit provider of domestic violence prevention and intervention services in Wisconsin. We offer our array of programs and services in the areas of prevention and intervention. And some of those, I do want to tell you about some of our services. But before I get to that, I want to tell you that we're unique in Wisconsin, and that we are a part of, Sojourner was the lead in bringing together 14 other co-located programs, and we're in a building that's called a Family Peace Center. You might know it, or you might have heard of the term Family Justice Center. We were one of the original cohorts in the Family Justice Center movement, and we're very proud of that. We have different partners in the building, like the police, law enforcement, our district attorney office. We have mental health providers, both for adults and children. Also in our building is Sojourner's 24-hour hotline, text line, as well as our emergency shelter. So some of our mission statement is that we transform lives that have been impacted by domestic violence. Very much the same for many of you. And again, we do that through a variety of programs and services at Sojourner. We have been in existence now for about 47 years, coming up on our 50th. We're very excited about that. We provide crisis counseling to individuals and families. We have children's programming and some support groups, as well as we serve for our county as the assistance for the courthouse, and if individuals want to file a restraining order against someone for domestic violence or domestic abuse, or non-domestic abuse actually, situation that they're facing and experiencing. So again, I'm very happy to be here. We at Sojourner really do believe that it's important for us to be a part of these types of conversations, and then to also to learn. I'm not just here to give information, but also to learn. And so if there any additional information someone wants about Sojourner, I'm happy to give that. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla. Next, let's hear from Monica Kearney. She is the Executive Director at Safe Space in Lewisburg, North Carolina. Welcome, Monica.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here, and thank you, Ashley, for having me and inviting me to this event today. And I'm with Safe Space Incorporated, And Safe Space is the only nonprofit organization in Franklin County, North Carolina, that is providing intervention and prevention services to victims and survivors of domestic and sexual violence. We have a small but very impactful prevention component that facilitates strategies to reduce the incidence of violence occurring within our community through using evidence-based primary prevention efforts. And we work diligently in our small community and county of 68,000 people to make change and bring about change in that way. I've been with Safe Space since 2014. I began there as an intern and was later hired as a part-time advocate. And then about 6 months later, the executive director at that time retired, and the spotlight was on me to join the ranks in this movement. And it has been a blissful coming up on 7 years of experience and learning from partners in this movement against violence. And one of the beautiful parts of being a transformational leader such as myself is in my ability to bring people together. And I think that's important when we're talking about hiring and managing staff and retaining staff to do some of the mission-driven work to reduce violence in our communities. And part of that is working together diligently in those efforts within the organization and hearing the voices of the people that we not only serve, but the people that also work for us, and using those strategies to build upon the work that we want to do as an organization. So I'm pleased to be here and share in some of those lessons that we've learned and some of the challenges that we faced. Safe Space, like most domestic violence programs across the state and country, we have the 24-hour crisis hotline, the children's services. We have family services where we also conduct triple P parenting classes. We have virtual support group that we just launched with some of our interns. And we have a pretty good intern program with MSW social workers learning how to work in the field. And we have a 13-bed shelter as well that is part of our service component and capacity. So we do a lot of work and wear many hats, but we are really grateful for our ability to make change and raise the consciousness of our community in the work against violence. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monica. And now let's hear from Linda Perez, the CEO at Shade Tree in Las Vegas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Ashley and domesticshelters.org for inviting us to this panel. I am very honored to be on this panel and to be invited with the likes of women like Carla and Monica. So thank you for doing this. I'm excited to be here. I am Linda Perez. I am the CEO of the Shade Tree, and we are located in Las Vegas. I am actually originally from the Midwest, and I ran a shelter back there. And lo and behold, this is a great story. When I was actually at that shelter, we worked with the Shade Tree and did a transport just to get a client that was fleeing violence and her abuser. We actually worked with Las Vegas Metro and the Shade Tree staff at that time, and we were able to get her safe. So I love sharing that story because I think it is significant in the work that we do that we all know shelters and resources and services, not only in our specific community, but also across the country, because there are times where we need to relocate our clients. So I just wanted to mention that. A little bit about me. I'm a survivor also. I grew up in a domestic violence home, so this work is very, very important to me, as well as my staff. The Shade Tree, we are a survivor-led organization, as well as some of my leaders. So I believe that that really helps us connect to our clients, our survivors, taking them from victim to survivor, I think is very important. we all know what the statistics are of domestic violence, the 1 in 4, 1 in 7, although we know that those are just reported cases. So we all know as professionals and experts in this area that those numbers are significantly higher. So the work that all of us do is extremely important to making change in our families. When I talk about what we do, when you think about those statistics, I always share with people why every single person in this world needs to understand domestic violence, because it affects every single one of our families. If you think about those statistics, the 1 in 4, just thinking about your specific family and friends, that means either you, someone you know, someone you love has or will be affected by domestic violence. And it is my goal, along with all of these wonderful partners, to make domestic violence awareness as big as cancer research, as big as some of those others, because our issue of domestic violence and unhealthy relationships affects every single family. So I love the opportunity to talk with others about ideas and best practices. And I'm very excited to be here to share some of what we are doing, but also to learn what other people are doing and how do we work together, even if we're not in the same state, to really make a difference in what we're trying to do. At the Shade Tree, we are the largest shelter of our kind in the state of Nevada. Our clients are domestic violence, human trafficking, and homeless women and children, as well as their pets. We have a partnership with Noah's Animal House, which they actually just started another location in Reno. So there's one in Vegas. It's actually on our property of the Shade Tree. So we all know how important that is for pets to be able to seek shelter and be with their family. So we're very grateful that we have that benefit. We provide case management, life skills groups, activities, all of those things that you all do as well. It is our goal so that and I love when people come and ask, can we do a tour? Can we meet your team? Absolutely. I love when people come and they meet my team and they take a tour of our shelters so they can see we don't just provide a bed and food. I think that's also a misperception of what people think when they think of a shelter, that it's just bed and food. And that's not it at all. We are really, from the time of intake to the time that they complete their program, and then even after, continue to be a resource to them. It is important for us for the limited amount of time that we have with them, to really impact their lives. So they are goal setting, they are meeting with their case managers, they are attending life groups. They are doing all of those things so that we can help them live their best lives, just like we are. And that's the goal, right? I think one of the most important things that we should do as experts in this area, and I call us experts, is that we need to really make sure that our communities that we are in, that they know the resources that we have available, and that they want to learn and educate themselves and their loved ones on this issue. So I hope I covered what I was supposed to, but again, I get so passionate about this work, and I'm grateful that this group of audience is here because they want to learn, they want to grow, and they want to share as well and ask the questions, how can we work better together as a community, fighting against domestic violence and intimate partner violence and sex trafficking and all of those things. So that's me. I hope I was able to cover what I was supposed to in my introduction.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. And thank you to all three of you for being here today. I love hearing how excited you are to be here, and just your really just openness to share what your experiences are, because that's how we learn. We learn from each other, and that's how we get better, and we can help more and more victims and survivors of abuse. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen so that way we are all here for everyone to see. And what we'll do is we'll dive right into the discussion. So I want to start off, we'll kind of break things up today into 3 different sections and then kind of a general section as well. But talking about hiring first, and then we'll talk about managing and then retaining. And then, like I said, a couple little general questions to kind of tie everything together. So I'm going to start off with kind of a broad question. What are the biggest challenges that you face when you're hiring new employees? Monica, do you mind starting us off?
I will. Thank you, Ashley. One of the biggest challenges we face is finding skilled people to do the work, because we don't want just a body. We are looking for people who are, like Linda indicated, passionate about the mission and the focus of the work. And it is not just coming into the organization and serving as somebody that can just do paperwork and not connect with people. So that is a challenge, is finding people that are passionate, whether they are a survivor or not, and have the charisma and empathy for other people, and willing to take sometimes the pay that is not as high as we would like for it to be. That is one of the challenges we face, the competition and the compensation for the work that we're asking people to do, and kind of those budgetary limits that we face. And that's a real challenging component for us.
Carla or Linda, anything to add to that?
Sure. I'll jump in and add that for what we found is the challenge is really accurately depicting what the job is without scaring off people. And sometimes I think individuals, just based on the candidates that we receive and their experience and their resumes, they think that anyone can do this job, like Monica was saying, and not really understanding the intensity of the work. But again, just the challenge of balancing, describing it to someone who you think might be a good candidate and who can grow into a position, again, without scaring them off.
Yes. And I will just add to that, because Carla and Monica hit it, especially it's finding the experienced qualified workers for the budget that we have to work with. And then the other piece of that is really, and this could be, Ashley, another panel discussion, is letting our grantors know that in order for us to run our programs, that we need to be able to use those funds for salaries so that we can hire qualified, skilled employees that really are passionate about this work and want to learn and grow. One of the things that just recently happened, because we know this work is hard, and you're right, we can explain it in an interview, but unless they're actually on the floor, unless they're actually dealing with a client and seeing those little children's faces and be able to do those things, it's really difficult. So one of the things that we are starting to implement in January is our new hire orientation is going to look a lot different. So it is going to be a 2-week process. They'll get a little bit of HR, they'll get a little bit of every single department, but they will get real hands-on to see what exactly happens. And as a staff, we're doing better at doing scenarios and role playing so that we can kind of prepare people for the work that we do.
Yeah, any other kind of solutions? I know obviously we're putting forth some challenges here. Any other solutions that any of you have found to kind of overcome those barriers?
I know it's safe space, going back to what Linda talked about, was the training component. We actually started this, just recently hired a new person to operate our shelter program. And I made sure this time that I was intentional in meeting with that staff person and not just leaving it up to the person that she's replacing to train that person, but to be there so I could learn. Also, we're a small agency, but we do big things. So right now I don't have an administrative assistant. So it's difficult for me at times to be in all the places I need to be at one time, but being intentional as a leader and making that time to show that you are on a learning curve as well, and then training so you're the voice that they hear when it comes to the HR questions, when it comes to how, you know, and the empowerment philosophy that the organization operates under, and how what the expectation is in that mission-driven focus. But that training component is really key.
Yes, the training is, and I just want to add, Monica, that everything that you said is extremely, extremely important. And it is understanding and being intentional with every single thing. And I think for all of us leaders here is actually intentional was our word. At the beginning of every year, I pick a word for myself and also the team and the organization. And for the shade tree, at the beginning of the year, our focus was everything that we were going to do is going to be intentional. And that is very key to our work, because we don't have the resources that other organizations have, that for-profits have. So everything that we do has to be intentional.
And I'll just jump in and add to that, just as a solution, and this is a practical solution, is we have an employee referral program. And so that way, our employees, if they refer someone, we know that they've told them something good about the organization. It also comes with an attractive incentive, financial incentive for the employees. And I think that that's one way to help with recruitment. Now, of course, as we talk more in this session, your organization has to be one where your employees want to refer someone, but we'll get into that, but that's one practical solution.
Really great stuff, everyone. I think we kind of touched on the main points of here, just what are the challenges of how to find and hire new employees, and what specific characteristics. We will dive into that a little bit more. What are some specific characteristics you're looking for when screening candidates? I know that we've already touched on a few, but anything else to add to that point?
You know what, I'm going to add, because I know what we all know what our qualifications are. So victim trauma informed and all of that. But for me, I believe that we also need to look for those things as professionalism, hospitality background, and compassion. So for me, I actually, my first career was with the casino industry, and some of my leaders are, and I can tell you that I can absolutely see a difference in my team that has had that background in leadership with the casino industry to those that have not. It's very different in terms of leadership styles, their skills, their communication, their professionalism. So for me, those are things that maybe we all don't necessarily think about, but I think hospitality, professionalism, and compassion is really needed in the work that we do.
Anything else to add there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I will add that just being creative and innovative. To tag on to what Linda said, really thinking outside of traditional roles or traditional jobs and positions that candidates usually come to us having, and looking again. I'm of the school of thought that we can train people on trauma-informed care if they come with compassion, if they can demonstrate that, and doing that in another field, doesn't necessarily have to be social services or domestic violence, but being creative and thinking outside of what we're used to seeing and hiring for.
Really great point there. I do kind of want to switch gears here a little bit on hiring. As far as just practical tools, are there any new technologies or tools that you all are using to get more creative in the hiring process? I know here at domesticshelters.org, we hired a new employee this year, and we are looking at, we looked at Indeed for a long time, and then we switched over to LinkedIn, and we found, this magical place where there was a lot more candidates as well. What tools are you all using?
Well, in Franklin County, with our organization, we have used Indeed as a tool. We've used Facebook. to advertise for
Yeah.
part-time shelter advocates, and word of mouth often. And so I was really excited to hear Linda talk about the employee referral program, because one of our staff members in particularly knows a lot of people, and some of our staff have come on board through their relationship. So and through that referral to the program. So those are strategies that we use at Safe Space.
We use the same. We were using Indeed. Indeed can get quite costly though, because we always want to watch our expenses. So we've used Indeed, but we also just discovered using LinkedIn is a great opportunity to find people that are professionals and looking for, a great job. So LinkedIn is also, we've also started partnering with local universities for possible internships, or for someone who's about to graduate and looking to get into this work and all of that. So we really do have to be creative. We use our social media as well. And just really what I've shared with our team, my leadership team recently, as we start looking at each of their departments going into the next year, is we are not a Fortune 500 company, but we need to act and think like one. And that means that even though with the limited resources we have to act like we are a Fortune 500 company with the best employee programs, with the best employee reward programs, so that we can make sure that our staff is taking care of our clients. And then constant training of obviously DV and human trafficking and homeless. But that's one thing that is working for me right now, is changing the mindset of my leaders to function as if we are a for-profit company and in the news all the time.
Yeah, that's a really great, I think mindset is really important in how you approach things. I think obviously we all have a caring and compassionate approach to how we do our work because of the people that we're helping. But yeah, being able to put that CEO of a major company mindset on really changes things. Carla, did you have something to add?
Real quick, I wanted to add to say, please don't overlook your board members and your volunteers. I think sometimes we think about board members for the management or executive director, CEO positions, but sometimes board members can also help with our frontline staff as well.
Yeah, really great suggestion there. So that's kind of all we kind of wanted to chat about for hiring, or at least that was on my list of questions. Anything else you want to add about the hiring process and tips and things that you've learned before we move on to the topic of managing? No? All right. Okay, well, let's move
Ashley,
on then.
Ashley,
please.
real quick, I do want to add, sometimes our agencies, we have job descriptions that were developed 20 years ago. And so for us to remember that, refresh our job descriptions, talk to, partner with your HR, your human resources department. And if you're like Monica and you might be the human resources department, then just do an assessment like all of us. We work, even though we're the largest DV organization in Wisconsin, Sojourner is still a small agency. So it's not that we have this wide bench either, deep bench for doing some of these things, but just to look and refresh. We did that not too long ago, and I think it helps. And stay interviews, I'll probably mention that a couple of times throughout this webinar, but looking at really assessing the job, and is the job accurate? And you can get a sense if the job description is accurate by the rapidness of people leaving the job, but after they've been in there a while. So that's what I wanted to add.
Oh, really, really great addition. And I could tell by everyone's faces and body language that everyone agrees with that. It's really important to go back and take a look at them as well. Well, great. Well, let's shift over then to managing. So we'll start off with kind of the same question. What are the biggest challenges that you face when it comes to just managing frontline employees? Linda, do you mind starting us off there?
Yeah, yes. And as I mentioned, For me, so I've only been, I don't even think I said this, I've only been with the Shade Tree for, it'll be 3 years in April. So when I came in, it was a lot of assessing and looking at programs and services and all of that. And one of the big things is I've had to do significant training, leadership training and development with my top leaders, and then getting them to the level that I need them to be, to make sure that it goes down to their frontline employees, which is tough. When you're working for a nonprofit, again, you don't have all the resources that a for-profit would have. Great training tools, great employee benefits and practices, and all of those good things. So for us, for me, it was really looking at my leadership team, starting there, providing them training, ongoing training, leadership training, the basic things of understanding FMLA, understanding basic HR laws and policies, and then being able to take that down. It has been a very challenging time for me in the last almost 3 years that I've been there, because not only was I looking at our programs and services, but I have had to look at our entire employee pool, who we have, are they the right people, rearranging roles, developing roles that weren't there that was very much needed. So this is a very challenging thing to do when you're doing all of the things as the CEO, but also now you're in charge of leadership development and training from your leaders all the way to the frontline employees. So I'm always open to ideas and suggestions for that. But what I've had to do is a lot of, like I said, leadership training and development, a lot of training for being victim-centered, and just letting them understand all of the rules and everything that also go with having grants. Because with grants, you're looking at activity-based timesheets and all of that stuff. So it's been a lot for the entire organization. And I'm sure Carla and Monica have experienced that too. And maybe all of you, because we know that having government grants, it's a lot of requirements that we have to make sure that we're being accountable for.
Yeah, really great. Carla or Monica, anything to expand on that?
I would expand by saying that it's not an either or. So when I say that, I'm thinking about striking that balance between communication and transparency with the staff. And as Linda was saying, we have that 30-foot view, and the frontline staff person has their view, however narrow it might be, or their perspective. And it's important for us to figure out exactly just how to communicate what they're looking for in a way that's transparent and in a way that builds on trust and develops trust between the manager and the frontline employee.
Yeah, really important. Thank you for that.
I think for me, the biggest challenge I've faced, especially since COVID, and managing employees, is this remote process. That has been a very difficult process for me as a manager. A challenge has been, do I bring everybody back? Like right now, we're on a staggered schedule. So some of us are in the office some days, and some of us, we alternate days that we're all in the office. And just knowing in the midst of COVID and with all the changes, what is the right thing to do? That has been a very difficult and very challenging process. Even with operating our shelter program never closed. We continued to take folks who were in imminent danger. We limited some of the counties that we would take people from, because our shelter provides shelter not only for our county, but 2 other counties that are adjacent to us that do not have shelter programs within their county. So we do our best, but I'm telling you, the COVID pandemic has really reshaped how we have had to use our creativity, like Carla said, to figure out how do we do this work safely, and how do we keep our team safe, because it's like I told some of my staff yesterday, wear those masks. We don't get enough compensation for if you lose your life to this virus or you have long-term impacts from this virus. So for me, that's been my biggest challenge. And the solution to that is just use as many universal precautions as we can, including, purchasing those, what are those things called? Those air purifiers. We got some of those for the shelter and the office, just trying to do all we can to keep it safe. But that's been a challenge, especially at shelter. And, it's been a lot.
Yeah, I don't doubt it at all. Very good. Well, thank you all for that insight. I did want to shift to talking about training. So, how do you make sure that your staff always has ongoing training, and why is training so important? Carla, do you mind kicking off on this one? Oh.
Sure, I can kick it off. Yes. So training is important because one, staff, it's a way for agencies to show staff that we care about them and that we're investing in them. Yes, it's important for them to keep up with the latest in the field with trauma-informed care and everything else that's going on. But for me, that's the reason that I think training is so important, is that staff see that you care about them and that you're willing to invest some of the agency resources in the training. Now, beyond that, yes, we want our staff to have the technical skills that they need to do this work. And it's also, for a practical reason, it gives them a break from doing the work and an opportunity maybe to talk with someone across the agency that they don't necessarily see in their department. So for me, that's the reason why it's so important.
Yeah, the training piece is absolutely so important. We're always looking at that. The other thing with training is we actually do the yearly training. We just implemented that as well. So just like for-profits where there's compliance training that happens every year, we do that as well. The sexual harassment training. So not just training for our field, but also the training that is needed in every organization: sexual harassment, diversity and inclusion, HIPAA, all of those things. And training is a huge, important piece to absolutely everything we do. And I mentioned about how we're revising our orientation, but also what we did this year is we implemented an employee opinion survey, just like we did in casinos and Target and every other organization. So we actually did an employee opinion survey. With that results, we were able to find out what they liked, what they didn't. Training was one of the big things: training, communication, and rewards and recognition. So we now have committees that include one of my leaders, as well as employees from every department, so that they can be on the communication committee, on the training committee, on the rewards and recognition committee, so that they can actually have a voice and suggestion and impact in what that looks like for them. So in addition to all the training that we do, we've also added a lot of employee related things that they are part of it. They are part of the decision making. They are part of the things that we do there. So again, that's very key for us as well.
At Safe Space, we use a couple of different strategies. We collaborate and are members of our state coalitions so that they offer so many trainings. We are part of domesticshelters.org. And so I'm constantly emailing out to the staff, particularly our part-time shelter advocates, to participate in the webinars. We require our team to get 24 hours of training a year. One of the other things we do, I'm big on sharing the leadership roles, and I have one team member in particular who is very effective in their approach to keeping us all motivated. I've given some of our staff like little nicknames to keep the energy and morale going. And so part of our training, this year she was able to implement a leadership training and did that with our two managers of our thrift store and our shelter. and then follow back up with them to make sure, you know, what challenges are you facing. Probably the challenge is making sure that when you do trainings and when people participate in trainings, I always tell my team that I want to be able to see what you've learned, because it's one thing to know, but knowledge is not power without action. And so I want to be able to see some action around what is that you've learned and how you've applied those things that you've learned. And so I have a good team. I coin ourselves kind of like a football team, and I'm the coach, and I can show you the plays and the X's and O's, but you have to execute these strategies, because sometimes my eye can see what you can't. And we can all be passionate and stuff like that and want to tear down the walls of our local counties, leaders, offices. However, that is not always the best way to address the systematic challenges we face as nonprofit organizations doing human service work. So that training part is important, but also we are very intentional in our efforts to have staff meetings where it's empowerment meetings. And that's part of that self-care component that is important for my team.
You know, one of the things I wanted to add to is us as leaders. So in addition to the training piece, I'm actually going to start my own life group with our clients, just because mine is going to be on empowerment. So just so that my case managers and my advocates understand that I'm in this too, and we have to do whatever we need to make sure that we're impacting their lives. So my life group is obviously, because I'm a survivor, but there is knowledge and case management that I don't do it all the time anymore, but I need to stay connected to my mission as well. So not just our frontline employees, but constantly us as leaders, we have to continue to grow and learn, and how do we adapt to changes. And I think COVID is a perfect example. I think you guys can agree, because Monica touched on it a little bit, and so did Carla, is training and our protocols. We've seen in these last 18 months that whatever protocols and policies we have as leaders, we have to stay on top of it, be innovative, creative, and keeping our staff and our clients safe, right? And we're constantly reaching out to resources and networks to say, hey, this is new, because the pandemic is new. We have now had to add new policies and procedures to our employee handbook because of the pandemic and because of all of this. So it's constantly evolving. And I think training and all of the things that we do, including ourselves, is we always have to keep evolving as well.
Yeah, really great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. I did have a question for all of you, and actually, I think, well, Monica kind of answered it. Was what is her hours of training, requirement? Curious to know, Monica, is that something beyond what the state requires, or is that what your state requires, or are there no requirements from your state?
It depends. Well, it depends on your funding source. Our main funding source is a state agency, and they require the 24 hours. But I'm gonna tell you, my team is on fire, and they typically go above and beyond. And the benefit for the remote work is that now we're able to have more people participate in some of the things that typically they wouldn't have the opportunity, like our part-time advocates typically work other full-time jobs. So just like today's session, they may not be able to be online, but it's recorded. So they'll be able to go back and see some of those things where it's just in the past, it's not. But yes, that is one of our state funders require 24 hours.
Linda, how about in Nevada and in your organization? What do you require, and what's required by the state?
So all of our employees, and before it was just our programs team, but if you're an employee in a domestic violence shelter, I believe that every employee needs to understand the training. So every single employee has to go through the advocacy training, and we do that with the Nevada Coalition. So we have those trainings, but like Monica said, we do the standard trainings that is offered by the coalitions and so forth, but we also have trainings locally. So we've had the Rape Crisis Center do human trafficking training. We've had things like that. So we are always open to partnerships, collaborations, and learning from other organizations, but also having other organizations come in and train as well.
Really great. Thank you. And Carla, how about in Wisconsin?
In Wisconsin, it's very similar depending on the funding source. Because we receive state funding, we are required, there's some trainings that we're required to have all of our staff participate in, well, our frontline staff participate in, and those that work in our programs. So the same thing. And then other trainings, we, again, leverage that of being in the coalition and other partners and some of our board members and other resources that we come across as well.
Very good. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. We'll just touch on one more topic here in managing before we move on to kind of retaining employees. And I think this one kind of ties into that last section of the discussion is how do you help your staff understand that they are not responsible for a client's healing, only to provide tools and resources? Monica, do you mind? I think we'll circle back to you to kick that one off.
We use an analogy at Safe Space, using a fishing rod, a lake. We're country girls down here, so we talk about a lot. Your job, if you want to teach somebody how to feed themselves, you give them the pole and you show them how to fish. But if I'm fishing for them, and then that is me doing the work for the person that needs to eat. So we use that analogy a lot. We have done boundaries training. I'm a MSW, so it is nothing for me to put a training together and say, hey, we're going to learn about this today. We do boundaries training, understanding clients' rights to self-determination. All of my staff are not social workers, but I was born a social worker. It's just part of what I do. And so I teach a lot of the ethics and integrity conversations and trainings that we have come from the social work perspective and the National Association of Social Work Code of Ethics. And that is helping the team understand that there are boundaries between your relationship with the client, and your job is simply to give tools and resources, not to be a person that rescues. People have a right to be who they are, whether that's a healthy state of being or not. And one of the things that I drive home is that we will support a person's right to self-determination, but we will not enable that right to self-determination. And so there is a big difference. And I lead, everything about me is from my heart. So sometimes even myself, I have to kind of step back and be logical in my approach when I'm working with clients sometimes. And sometimes some of my team will say, Monica, don't answer the phone. Because my heart is just like, yes, yes, yes. But making sure that we staff in those tough cases. Because even in the training of our new employee that we're doing, one of the things that we've said, it is not cookie cutter. And one of the things that you will make mistakes, but trust in those places where you do make mistakes, that's actually a learning curve. So what strategies and then can we put in place for you to do things a little bit different? But boundaries, ethics, and just really understanding people's right to self-determination. We can't fish for the people. We have to show them and give them the tools. And even for our community, you know, I say to our county all the time, I'm your executive director, and domestic and sexual violence is not a safe space issue. It's a community problem. And the community has a responsibility, a moral responsibility to be at the seat of the table to do this work in collaboration with us, regardless of whether we're rural, urban, or whatever. And I'm gonna stop talking because I'm getting ready to get on a soapbox. But those are areas, understanding those boundaries. We can't do it all, and we cannot do it all by ourselves.
Very well said.
Amen to that, Monica. Like, I'm ready to mic drop and praise hands and all of that. So everything that she said is exactly it. boundaries, making sure that we have that balance and we don't cross the line for boundaries. There's one thing to be victim focused, and then there's the enabling piece. So we've had to really make sure that the staff knows. It's hard, even for myself, when I have the little kids and I'm doing an activity with them. It's hard to not get attached and to not feel, and we're humans, but it's understanding and setting the example that we can impact their lives more if we are holding them accountable too. There are days when they can't get out of bed, and we can appreciate that and we can allow that. But then when does the case manager come back and for, okay, Susie Smith, it's time to get up. We have goals to work on. So it's always that balance, right? But everything that Monica said is on point. So thank you.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, let's go ahead and move on. By the way, all three of you are being poached by everyone in the chat right now. So you're going to be giving job offers across the board, just sharing that. So let's move on to retaining. Let's talk about the Great Resignation. I know we opened up with a poll and learned that most people are experiencing this phenomenon. So what adjustments are you all making? How are you handling this? Carla, do you mind kicking this one off?
Sure, I can kick this one off. And first, I want to say that I want to talk to the 27% who said they're not being impacted.
I thought that too.
Because give
Lucky
up the secrets, give up the secrets. But so yes, we are being impacted by it, and individuals at our agency, some people were on the verge of making decisions before COVID. We know that this is a face-to-face kind of work. And so with COVID, it just naturally caused individuals to reflect on the work that they're doing. What I still say that employee engagement surveys, I read somewhere that if you're not always surveying employees, then you're not surveying them at all. Those stay interviews, we have at Sojourner, we do stay interviews on a regular basis. It used to be that we did them when we saw an increase in attrition in a certain department, but we moved from that and really shifted to doing stay interviews for that purpose of keeping individuals, because it's always a shame to me to find out from a departing employee in an exit interview, or to hear about it later, that they're leaving for something that's minor and something that we really, had we known, we could have addressed and talked about and then retain them as an employee. So I think that that's what it is, partnering with the Human Resources Department. And if you don't have a Human Resources Department, doing those stay interviews, and you can search online for stay interviews. There's a lot of resources, and then you can tailor that to your agency.
Really great. Linda or Monica, anything to add to that?
I think I mentioned earlier, but exactly that is retaining them. That's why we've added the employee opinion surveys and these committees, these ongoing trainings, and just employee engagement is really important. As I mentioned, our goal as a leadership team is to function as if we were a Fortune 500 company. And that means also just everything from the top down. It also means having all of those practices that large companies have. I don't care if it's on a very small scale, but those best companies to work for and all those things that we read about, I've shared that that's what we want to be. We want to be the best company to work for, regardless if we're a Fortune 500 company or not. So those practices that large companies have, I would suggest looking at those and seeing if you can implement them in your business practices, no matter how small, but those things that work well for those large organizations, they can work well for us too. And I want to be one of the best places for my employees to say, this is the best place to work. I get leadership training, I get mentorship, I get everything that I possibly need, and the rewards and recognition I get are there as well. So that's our goal, and we will just continue to look at what other companies are doing and see if we can implement them with us.
For me, retention is a self-reflective process. And I believe that we have not experienced a great level of turnover because of the type of leader that I am. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but as leaders, we have to be accountable unto ourselves and how we represent our organizations. And part of that is be transparent. One of my biggest challenges as a leader is, for a long time, I thought I had to be perfect and get everything right. And I fell hard on my face quick because I'm a visionary and I'm a natural change agent. And I thought I could do it all, and I thought I could do it all by myself. And it was not until I realized the hard way that I could not, that I began to learn, and I'll just do a shout out to the National Honor Society that I'm in for leadership success, NSLS. I learned how to be a more effective leader, and the 4 pillars of leadership. Anybody that's an ED needs to Google that. The 4 pillars of leadership: idealization, influence, your role to influence and lead and bring about. Listen, if people don't believe in you, they are not going to believe in your vision. I can have 1,000 letters behind my name, certificates, honor societies, and all of that, but my integrity as a person, my fight as a woman, my personal experiences, like you, Linda, I come from all levels of victimization, you name it, that's it. But it is gas in my engine. And some stuff you just can't teach. You have to bring it. And we've had to embrace each other in our journeys. And so as a leader, I motivate my staff. Some mornings I call myself like I'm like Ellen DeGeneres. I wake up dancing. And in the mornings we have a group meet, and I'll send out inspirations. Self-care is not about giving staff something else to do, something else to read, like that article. I forget. I think it might have been you. I'm not sure who sent the article about the self-care being lip service. And here's some articles you can read about mindfulness. It's what is that action about? And engaging and being on the same level with your team. And we operate as a family. And that's how we retain our staff. And if one of us is challenged, going through something personally, I mean, COVID really impacted. I don't know if you all have ever heard of organizational trauma, but that's what a lot of nonprofits are experiencing, is the organizational trauma that has impacted us so significantly. So if our families that we serve are experiencing the mental health challenges, the increased stresses, the domestic violence, some families have never seen domestic violence before, they're now experiencing it. Do we not think as leaders that some of our staff might be going through the same thing? So how dare I not be reflective in my approach and how I supervise and how I motivate and how I encourage, even the trainings, being conscious of what is it that my team needs. So I'm a very democratic in my leadership approach. I want the insight of my staff, and I try my best to let them know we are in this together. And the way you retain, and I believe this from my heart, the way you retain staff is just like Maya Angelou says: people forget what you said, but they forget what you did, but they will not forget how you made them feel. And I tell people, I want to come to work and feel good about what I'm doing, even though it's a hard job. And I want to paint the same picture and have the same environment for my team. So that's what I do at Safe Space to keep my staff. We go out to eat. We do fun things together. We went to the fair one year together and just hung out. And it's not about each other getting into each other's business and personal lives, because that life is different than the work life, but just activities that show, hey, I care. If somebody loses a loved one, we send flowers. We even go to the funerals if we're able to. We show that if our motto is family first, then we act like that as an organization.
Really great. Thank you, Monica. And you kind of springboarded us into one of the final topics I want to talk about when it comes to retaining employees, which is, we hear the term self-care tossed around. Carla shared an article that Rachel put in the chat for us here, just about giving, lip service to that term of self-care and how do you really do it, but in a way that makes sense financially. Carla, do you mind just jumping in with your take on self-care and how you approach it at your organization?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So Monica really got us started talking about if our clients are facing these different stressors, who are we to not think our staff are facing the same stressors? They're part of the community. Like many of your organizations, Sojourner, there's a good percentage of our employees that are survivors of domestic violence and sadly some who are experiencing domestic violence while they're doing the work. So that's something that we shouldn't be, we should pay attention and not ignore their personal stresses. And part of what that article says, when you have a chance to read it for the audience, is that the stress levels increased and then they didn't go back down. So we know the work is cyclical sometimes for us, but with the pandemic, the work has not been cyclical. The stress, I should say, has not been cyclical. And it really is an opportunity for us to look at what we say about self-care. Is it one of those things that's automatic for us? Are we, as they say in that article, sending around information about yoga instead of really trying to get to know what self-care means to our employees, and to not look at it as just costing things that cost a lot of money? Because there's things that you can do. I know everyone's tired of Zoom and tired of virtual and email, but this week we're doing an wellness email group, and the topic is balance before burnout. And it has been so enriching, and it was voluntary. So it's just the individuals that signed up as Sojourner are part of this email group. And I'm telling you, for me and all of us, it's been very enriching. We've got to know each other on a different level. But I do think self-care needs to be individualized in finding out what your agency, your employees want, and then not thinking of it that it has to cost money. And I'll stop there.
Really great. Linda, anything you'd like to add about self-care and how you kind of carry that out at the Shade Tree?
Yeah, I think you all know when that article was shared, I was like, oh no, like self-care is absolutely needed, even for myself. I think I shared my go-to is bubbles and bubbly. So bubble baths and champagne and candles and all that good stuff. Self-care is absolutely important. And I thank you, Carla, for sharing that article. And we all know that the work that we do, self-care is absolutely necessary. So I don't think that we push it or on our employees. I think self-care, we talk about it, making sure that all of our employees identify what their best self-care practice is. And then they do that. And we remind people, are you doing your self-care? Internally, it is employee engagement and watching those things and implementing. As I mentioned, we've had to add quite a bit of things to our employee handbook. And that is in addition to our employee assistance program. We've had to add quite a few things because, as we all know, while the world was going through that and people were not working, we never stopped working. So it was how do we be creative and how do we keep pushing forward and having that fire in our bellies, right? To how do we impact the clients that now we have all these limitations. So it was a matter of, we're like, how do we help more people? But now we realize we never stopped working, and our families, our employees, they were going through the same thing the entire world was going through. So it is very important that we're constantly looking at our training, our policies and procedures, and making sure that they're up to date and relevant to the times that we're in.
Linda, I noticed a question that just popped up in the chat. Could you share some specifics about things that you added to your employee handbook? Is it just more the policies and procedures around safety protocols, or were there more things that you added?
safety protocols as well as employee wellness. So just making sure, do we have those employees that are still fearful and they work in a client-facing role? What do we need to do to make sure that we're accommodating that employee's concerns? We also, something that we didn't really have to deal with there was, we also had to send a couple of our employees through addiction programs, so they didn't lose their jobs. We recognized that there was an issue, and there wasn't policies in place for that. But instead of losing great employees, we recognized what the need was, and we got them with one of our partners that we deal with our clients, and they are now in a recovery program, 2 of our employees. So it is really looking at this is our family, right? We're with our employees more than we are with our regular families. So it is looking at those things, employee wellness, updating COVID, because remember, we have employee laws, but now we have COVID. So it was reaching out to SHRM, reaching out to our networks, reaching out to our board members who are lawyers to say, hey, this is what we're dealing with now. Is this the right thing to do? What is the best thing to do for this? And I'm not afraid to ask. I'm not the expert in everything. And what I don't know, I have networks and resources that I'm going to pick up the phone and say, how do we do this the best? Because I want to make sure that our staff is safe legally as well. We're not doing anything that is not legal or we have to make sure that we're staying up on everything that's relevant.
Fantastic. Well, I had mentioned that we had some kind of general topics to talk about, but actually throughout the conversation, we've touched on everything from COVID to the Great Resignation to funding restrictions, things of that nature. So we're actually going to transition over to our Q&A. So just give me a moment here. I'm going to pull up the questions, and I'm just going to go through them in order on the list. So one of the first questions, just to kind of give a sense of, we mentioned that you're between rural and urban organizations, Monica being rural, Carla and Linda in more urban centers. But could you each just share what the size of your individual organizations are? Monica, if you don't mind kicking it off.
So Safe Space, we have 21 employees. The ED, there's 2 managers, the shelter manager, who has about 8 people under that position. And then the thrift store manager has about 6 people under that position. So about 14 people are actually part-time. And then about 8 of us are full-time. And then we have a contract finance manager, and we have a contract social media, Facebook web person. And I think that's all my contract people. So yeah. And our board of directors is 13 members.
Carla?
Sure. At Sojourner, our employees, we're somewhere around 90 employees. The majority of them are in the program department. So about 2/3 of the agency actually work in programs. Our largest department is our shelter and hotline department that has about, about 25 individuals with an associate director and then a supervisor in that department. We have a lot of part-time employees, as you may imagine, and we have some pool employees. At Sojourner, we have a lot of different departments, our strategic initiatives department. We have our ongoing case management. We have a hope and healing program that has our support groups. I mentioned shelter. We also have a program where advocates are in our Milwaukee police departments. There's an advocate in each police department, so serving as a liaison, and then many others. But I would say if you want even more information, you certainly can go to familypeacecenter.org. That's our website.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing that. That's awesome, knowing more about your organizations. At the Shade Tree, we are a 38,000 square foot facility. We take over pretty much an entire block. We can house comfortably up to 250 clients. However, because we are being more quality care rather than what it was prior to me getting there, we probably right now from COVID and that we're probably seeing anywhere from 120 to 160 clients right now averaging. We have 50, we average about anywhere between 49 to 52 employees. I have the primary departments that have the majority of the staff is our programs team, as well as security. Our security team is actually really huge given the location that we're at. I know not everyone is from Vegas, but our location is not a very good location. We are called what you would consider Charity Row or the Corridor of Hope, because we have the Las Vegas Rescue Mission, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Courtyard. So there's a lot of us that partner together. As I mentioned, we're always looking to expand. We launched our own hotline last October during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We also added a program that's called non-residential program, which means that our clients, not everybody needs a bed and food, but they might need case management. They might need to come and have be part of our activities. So that's kind of what we do right now. I'm always looking to expand. One of the big things in our strategy session, we will be focused on how do we give quality care to each of our populations, because as I mentioned, we have 3 populations together. And in my experience and what I've assessed, it doesn't work well together, having our homeless population with our victims. So we are looking at what that looks like in terms of another facility or another home or something like that, because that is one of the things that the Shade Tree, we will be enhancing or altering what our mission currently is, continuing to be focused on victims.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies. Question up here is, obviously there are laws in place and other things that govern this, but have your agencies decided to do a vaccine mandate, or how have you handled vaccinations at your programs? Carla, do you mind starting?
Sure, I can start. I can tell you that there's been a lot of discussion at the senior leadership level about this. In the end, we decided not to do a mandated vaccination because of the Great Resignation, quite frankly, and we already were seeing high attrition. Our turnover rate for this year is somewhere around 38%. That's really high for us. So as you can imagine, with a turnover rate that high, the staff, all of us, it's been all hands on deck, recruiting, hiring, training, and all of that scheduling. And so we did not want to exacerbate that problem by mandating vaccines. We've had vaccination clinics. Our director of public safety, he has been wonderful with seeking out resources and bringing resources right on site to do vaccines.
I will reiterate what Carla said. At the senior leadership level, that there's been a lot of discussion around that COVID fatigue for everybody, right? I saw a comment come up on the chat about a board really pushing for that. I have a board that is really pushing for that as well. However, I have not made the decision to mandate it, just because given our situation, and we have done really well since COVID first happened. We immediately put a task force together, and we've had one-off cases there. I am very proud of my team to say that we have not experienced any outbreak, any spread. When we've identified it, we've moved, we've reacted quickly, and I'm grateful for that. So I have not made the decision yet. So I have a lot of different opinions and everything. Almost 80% of my staff is already vaccinated. So we have not made that decision yet, but that is still an ongoing conversation that I still have with people, because I'm still on the fence myself.
At Safe Space, we are not mandating anybody to be vaccinated. I strongly believe in people's right to self-determination. So if we're not mandating the flu, and prior to COVID, a lot of more people were dying from the flu than COVID, I'm not in the position where I would do that type of a mandate unless, state, federal funders require it.
Yeah, really great. Yeah, it's great to get everyone's perspective on that. I know it's a topic that involves a lot of other people's input, because you rely on the governing bodies that you are beholden to. So appreciate hearing how everyone's kind of addressed and approached that decision.
I wanted to add, can I just add real quick? Because
Please.
Carla mentioned it. One of the things we also did was we established the relationship with the Nevada Health Department. So they were actually coming in once a month to do testing on all my staff and all my clients. So we've been able to do that. And just as of this week, they don't come every month, but they have provided us with tests so that we can do that. We had a case just this week where one of our children tested positive. So again, it's a child. So it's like, oh my God, because all the children are together. So we immediately were so grateful we were able to get those tests and, get everybody isolated and safe because of potential exposure. But the community has been really good with that. And if you all can get tests internally to have for those one-off situations, for those emergency situations, I would highly recommend that you work with your health departments and hospitals and stuff, and see if you can get tests for yourselves to have them available.
Really great. Thank you very much. So we have about 10 minutes left here, so we're going to continue through questions. One thing that came up, I know in our initial discussion, and I know Monica had a lot to say about this, was volunteer programs. Are any of you, obviously I'm calling Monica out here for having a volunteer program, so she can kick things off, but I'd love to hear from everyone as far as how you utilize volunteers to get the job done.
Several ways. At our thrift store, we use a program where it's called Beyond Challenges, I believe, and that program has volunteers who come in that have developmental delays that can actually work and volunteer in our thrift store, and they have a supervisor that comes on site with them. So they actually help us process all of our tons of donations that we get every day. One of my ways of giving back to my profession as a social worker is providing field instruction to BSW and MSW level social work interns. We had to develop virtual practice strategies, and that was a challenge, but we've done well. So they help, my interns actually help facilitate our online support group. One of my interns also facilitates all of our self-care challenges and strategies every 21 days. And we've had, when we were allowing volunteers into shelter prior to COVID, they would go in and learn how to be shelter advocates. They also have helped with a lot of the outreach and education that we do in the public. So we treat our interns, and I use interns just for that professional level of integrity. It's just different from having just a layperson on, when we're talking about direct client services, that's how we use I lean on my interns to help with the direct client service stuff. We also use community service workers in our thrift store that have to get community service hours. So they also can come to our store if they're nonviolent offenders and receive their community service hours. And we also have volunteers that help with our food pickup. And that has been very, very helpful because they go into the grocery store here locally, pick up the food donations, and then bring it back to the organization. So volunteers are very helpful in getting some of the work done. And you can use, we can't use our thrift store volunteers for in-kind match, but we can for anybody that uses interns or volunteers to do direct service type work. That can be a benefit to having those services, and you can have it where it's like market value. What would you pay them if they work for you? And you can use that as in-kind match donations for any grants that you receive.
Carla or Linda, anything to share about volunteer programs that you have?
We use volunteers as well. We used to use them a lot more, and not just before the pandemic, but we used to actually depend on them to fill essential roles in our organization, and not so much as we've added staff as we've added employees to fill some of those gaps and capacity gaps. But we still use volunteers. As you may imagine, most of the volunteers want to work in our shelter and hotline and text line area, but we also use them a lot for our in-kind donations. And as we're fortunate to be, like Monica, in a very generous community.
Yes, we use volunteers as well. We appreciate them so much, volunteers and interns, like Monica and Carla were sharing. They are very valuable to us. And just like we do employee appreciations, volunteer appreciation is extremely important for us as well. We absolutely need them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll end with one more question. Obviously, there's tons of questions that came in. So to everyone who didn't get their question addressed today, I'm going to use those to hopefully put together additional panels where we can discuss other topics that people are itching to know more about. But we'll leave with one more question and then kind of some closing thoughts here. I imagine that each of you have experienced a time when you were understaffed in a specific area. So curious to know what creative ways you were able to kind of overcome that, whether, in a way that was, able to best support victims and survivors. All right, Linda, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to start off there?
Yeah, I was like, one of the things that I think is important, I'm sorry, I so lost my train of thought because I was thinking, man, I can't wait to hear what Monica, because she's got so much, valuable information. What was the question again? I'm so sorry.
I love it. Yeah, it's just a great reminder that we're all here to learn. Obviously,
absolutely
shared such valuable information and insights. But just kind of looking at a standpoint of times when you have had to face understaffed roles and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Times when you were understaffed, what creative ways did you overcome that?
So that is actually extremely important. And I think we all know, that's why I was wondering how Monica does it, because when we are short staffed, my leadership team, that is us. Like we come out of our, development roles, our HR roles, or all of that. And if we have someone else, we experienced that when, we had employees that had potential exposure so that they had to get tested before they were back. That means that myself and my leadership team, we step in and we have to fill those roles too. So there's oftentimes in nonprofit that we are feeling short staffed and we can't find the qualified, individuals with the budget that we have. And as us, it's using volunteers, our interns, but also ourselves. We have to step in every role. I've had to clean bathrooms myself too. So it's whatever we do, all hands on deck.
Yeah, really great. Monica, anything to add to that?
I'll just piggyback. Yes, I don't ask my staff to do anything that I won't do myself. And we have been extremely short-staffed at shelter. And so my advocacy team have been a godsend for the shelter in those areas when there are gaps. They will go up and they'll work a second shift or a third shift for us to meet that need. Also, I'm always short-staffed because I need an assistant. But I have one employee that has served for several years as my, I say I'm right brain, she's my left brain. And she and I get together and we brainstorm and we come up with strategies, and we're doing a big fundraiser now. We need 3,000 people to give Safe Space $25 so we can expand our prevention program and do some protective work in our community with our youth. And so I delegate, delegate. And it goes back to who I am as a leader. We work together. And, like just for example, grant season, they know, and we're not going to see Miss Monica, but I don't have to worry about how the agency is flowing because everybody works with a passion and wants to do the right thing for the organization. And so I delegate a lot. That's what I do. I delegate a tremendous amount of work to some of my other teams when we are running short.
Fantastic. And Carla, thank you so much for sharing that employee referral document there. I'll make sure that anything that was shared today is in the shared resources folder. And same goes for Monica or Linda. If you have anything that you'd like to share, manual wise or training, that would be fantastic. We'll share that with everyone on the call today. But let's go ahead and wrap up. We have about a little bit less than a minute left. Just want to start off with Carla. Thank you so much. Carla actually came to me with this idea to do, talk about this topic. And so we kind of put together a panel of people to discuss it. And I'm so thankful for everyone, for Linda and Monica and Carla for showing up today and for, I've learned a lot, and I can tell from the comments that everyone's really enjoyed the conversation. So with that, Carla, anything that you'd like to send us off with today? Any parting words?
I've enjoyed the session. I certainly have enjoyed my being on this panel with Monica and Linda. Thank you, Ashley, for being receptive to the idea to do this. As you can see from the robust conversation, we could go on for the rest of the afternoon. So it's been wonderful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Linda, anything you'd like to say as we close up?
I can't thank you all enough, Ashley, everybody. Meeting Carla and Monica in our previous meetings and then communication, you all are just so amazing. Everybody that's joining us today, I can't thank you all enough for hearing, for making your comments in the chat, asking the questions, but also sharing what you all are doing too, because I believe these types of conversations need to happen so that we can really have the best practices. What are you doing well that I should be doing? What am I doing well that I could share with you? We can't make a dent in what we're doing if we all don't come together and share our resources and experiences. So I appreciate this, and I'm looking forward to hearing other panelists and being invited back for other things. So I really appreciate it. Thank you all so much.
Wonderful. That's a great segue. I want Monica to share some final thoughts as well, but just to the idea of our Facebook advocate group, it's a great space for these conversations to happen. Obviously, Facebook has its pros and cons, so we'll leave it at that, but that's a space that we've created. So I'll have Rachel will share that link again in the chat box. But turn over to Monica, just any parting words and we'll wrap up.
Parting words. I'm going to shout out all the executive directors in the meeting today. Continue to lead with passion, lead from your heart, and lead with consciousness and integrity, and your followers will follow. So just be encouraged and be inspired by the mission of your individual organizations and keep up the great work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Monica. And thank you to everyone. So thank you, Monica. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Just a quick reminder to everyone attending today, we did record this, so we'll send this recording out via email within the next week. We'll also have a certificate of attendance and a transcript. And like I said, any resources that were shared, links that were shared, we'll also make sure that those are available to everyone who attended today. I didn't mention at the top, but if you are a call-in listener, please email info@domesticshelters.org and let us know that you're here today, and let us know what email address to add to our distribution list. So again, thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic discussion. I really have enjoyed it myself. I've learned a lot, and hopefully everyone here today did as well. So we'll go ahead and conclude, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.